I often see questions where people ask what a good salary in Sweden is. And in today's video, I want to attempt to give you an overview about salaries in Sweden. I mention attempt because it is quite difficult to cover every little aspect of salaries in Sweden, but I do my best to cover as much information as possible so you get a better picture of what is possible here in Sweden when you earn a salary as an employee. I will cover salaries in Sweden across industries, different levels, and also different regions, because we all know that normally you earn more in a city, especially like Stockholm, compared to a rural area in Sweden. I will also talk a little bit about taxes, so you know how much you actually pay in taxes from your personal income. And then at the very end, I will also shortly cover cost of living, because it is quite important to mention that here in this video, because it's related to your salary, but I will not go into crazy details because otherwise this video will be super long. But if you have any questions at any point of this video, let me know in the comments down below, and I hope I can help you, maybe even make another video about a specific topic. Of course, the majority of this video is based on research. So I just took the time and researched what are the different salaries and put all the information together in this video. So at least you have one place to look at the idea of salaries in Sweden. At the end of this video, I will also share a little bit my opinion about salaries here in Sweden, coming from different countries. So make sure to stay tuned and watch until the end. And as always, before we get started, make sure to subscribe to my newsletter where I share what life in Sweden looks like. And you will also get a little ebook with 10 questions to ask you if Sweden is the right fit for you. You will find the link in the description below. Let's get started. So just like in my other video where I talked about different businesses you can start here in Sweden, I have notes here. So every now and then I will look down here on my screen to give you all the information. But first of all, I want to talk a little bit about industries. What are the most popular industries? So the most popular industries are motor vehicles, telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, industrial machines, precision equipment, chemical goods, home goods and appliances, forestry, iron and steel. But industries is still a little bit different when you look for a job. So I kind of looked at occupations. What are the biggest companies with the most employees or the biggest occupations? Basically, when you look at jobs and you want to find jobs, which kind of jobs would you find the most here in Sweden? I have a little graph here actually, which shows you the number of employed people in Sweden. It's from 2023 and it's sorted by type of occupation. So in this graph, you can see that financial operations and business services has, the most employees. And then comes human health and social work activities, education, manufacturing, mining and quarrying, energy and environment. Then we have trade, public administration, construction, information, communication, manufacturing of metal products, machinery and equipment, personal and cultural services, transport, accommodation and food services. And at the bottom is agriculture, forestry and fishing. So you get a little bit of an overview of what even does exist in Sweden. So that's why I put this graph here so you can see a little bit what's going on. And I put the source on the screen as well, but it's from Statista. And again, it's from 2023. So now I want to talk a little bit about levels. There's obviously salaries, where you earn the minimum basically, or there are salaries in occupations which pay you a high salary. But what is that high salary in Sweden? Every country is different. And in general, I would say the salaries are definitely a bit lower than in London. But let's have a look. So the average salary in Sweden is 35,000 Swedish krona, which is around $3,400. And that's a gross salary. So that's before you pay taxes. And then again, I have another graph which shows you a little bit the occupations with the highest average monthly salary in Sweden. It might not apply to everyone, but it is good to know, you know, what is actually the biggest salary you can make here in Sweden. And I'm talking really about being an employee rather than having your own business, because obviously there's no limit how much money you can make. But we have on top here financial and insurance managers, then senior government officials, finance dealers and brokers, specialist physicians, and you can see all the numbers, how much they make. For example, the specialist physicians makes an average 92,200 Swedish krona. Everything is in Swedish krona. Then we have finance managers, research and development managers, directors and chief executives, financial insurance managers, information communications technology service managers, real estate and head of administration managers, which, you know, with 78,900 Swedish krona, it's definitely more than double the average salary in Sweden. Of course, it's always possible to go higher and even lower within these occupations, but this is just an average, so it gives you some orientation what's possible here in Sweden. And in comparison, I also want to look at the earnings in low-paying professions in Sweden, and here we have service personnel with 23,400 Swedish krona. Again, before taxes, you still have to pay taxes on this, and I will talk about this a little bit later. Berry picker, plantation worker, cafe and confectionery cashiers, market researcher, interviewer, restaurant kitchen assistant, cleaner with 25,600 Swedish krona, nanny, wallpaperer and gardener. So these are the low-paying professions in Sweden, which are below the average salary in Sweden. So you have a bit of an overview what kind of the minimum wage in Sweden is. And if you look in dollars, it's almost, you know, like the nanny, for example, it probably would be around $2,400, something like that, per month. And then I want to cover a little bit of regions, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it is a difference if you work in a city like Stockholm or Göteborg compared to the rural areas of Sweden. And of course, the most jobs also exist in cities and lesser jobs are in rural areas. But let's have a look at another graph which shows the difference in average salaries by professions and municipalities. So here you can see there's Stockholm, and that shows a few occupations which have a bit of a higher salary than the average salary in Sweden. We have an economist, a lawyer, sociologist, IT, and HR specialist. And you see all the numbers, but I would just go through IT, because I think a lot of people who actually want to come to Sweden want to work in IT because it has quite a good, you know, market for it. So in Stockholm, you would earn 57,500 Swedish krona, and it goes really down. Gothenburg, 53,000, Malmö, 52, in the south, 49. Uppsala, Örebro, Dalarna going up in the north now is 49,700, and then up in the north is the lowest amount, which is 48,700 Swedish krona. And it makes sense, there are less bigger cities as well, but you can watch my property videos. You know, when you buy a property in Sweden, I made several videos which show you the prices of a house or an apartment in different areas of Sweden. And we know that in the north also the properties cost less. So that is obviously an advantage. So therefore also the salaries are not as high as in Stockholm, for example. And talking about salaries, one important thing are the taxes you actually pay on your income. And I pulled out like a website which gives you in detail really what you pay taxes on your salary, and there are also some benefits depending on how much you actually earn in Sweden. So let's have a look at 3 different examples. We have here the salary of a service personnel, for example, in retail or hospitality workers, of 23,400 Swedish krona, which is $2,300. And when we look at the website, we can see that the net salary will be 19,283 Swedish krona, which is $1,865 US dollars. And here when we look at the website, we can see really the details. We have the employer pays. Actually, that's also interesting to see that in Sweden, the employer pays on top of your gross salary. So here you can see, instead of the 23,400 Swedish krona, the employer actually pays 29,865 Swedish krona. So they have to pay some taxes to the government on your salary, on your gross salary actually. Then you have an employer fee, which then gives you your salary. And then we have basic allowance, a deduction that lowers taxable income. So you get that deducted and then you pay tax actually on a lower income, on a lower salary. Then we have employment tax credit, a tax reduction on earned income intended to increase work, incentives by reducing the tax burden, and in this case it's 2,167 you get. Then we have the municipality tax and the county tax. I think that's the biggest kind of amount you actually get deducted from your salary. State income is 0, church is optional, and then we get the net salary. Let's jump to another salary of a specialist physicians. We could see earlier they earn 92,200 Swedish krona, which is about $8,900. And I would say that is definitely so much lower than probably a physician would make in the US. I have not done my research, but from what I've seen and heard, I would guess that. And also, when we go to this website again, your net salary will be 59,423 Swedish krona, which is 5,700 US dollars. And here you can again see an overview of what you actually pay, how much your employer pays, and what kind of taxes you have to pay. For example, in the earlier salary, you didn't have to pay state income tax, but because this salary is higher, an extra 20% tax is leveled on income above that 598,500 Swedish krona per year. So you have to pay that as well. So you do pay quite a bit of taxes, especially the higher your salary is, the more taxes you pay. But obviously there's a cap at some point as well. Let's look at the third example, which is an IT specialist in Stockholm, earning 53,500 Swedish krona, which is around $5,500. And when we look at this website again, the net salary would be 42,499 Swedish krona, which is $4,100. And here you can just look at the numbers to get a better overview without me going through all the details again. So that was the taxes, and that's quite interesting, and you definitely have to, use like a calculator like this when you want to have a job in Sweden to really be aware of how much you actually get paid out. And then cost of living, again, this is such a big topic I can talk about for ages, and also varies a lot, and it depends on your lifestyle, etc. But you definitely can't just look at a salary and say it's a lot or not a lot just by its own. You kind of have to compare it with the prices you have around wherever your job is and where you would live at the end. So housing is probably the biggest fixed cost you have in Sweden, or anywhere really. So you have to make sure that you can pay your housing, if it is a mortgage or rent, from your salary. But also bear in mind, what I showed you is one salary, and normally in Sweden, both, when you're a couple, both are working in Sweden. If you have children, the system is that you can actually send your children to kindergarten or to school, although school is mandatory, but it doesn't cost much at all, like the kindergarten. So it's really affordable. So if you have two incomes, that's actually really, really great. And it is quite livable here in Sweden, even in the city, I would say. So obviously make sure to calculate with either two salaries, or if you only have one person having a salary, then you have to factor in all the costs. And I mentioned it before, watch my videos about properties here in Sweden to have a better picture of how much a house or an apartment costs in the city or even in the rural areas. So then you can calculate a little bit if your salary will be enough. at the moment, interest rates for buying a house or a property in general are quite high. So that is definitely something negative, but it obviously doesn't just apply for Sweden. It's like worldwide, really, since the pandemic started, or also, you know, in the middle, well, just after the pandemic, which doesn't really have a proper end. We experienced that ourselves. For example, I can put a graph here where I looked at the interest rate over the last, I think, 10 years or so, and it has been around 1.5% for a long time, which is just amazing. Like, I really wish like that would be the interest rate we would pay, but nowadays it's more around 4.5%, and that's actually already a bit lower than a few months back, or maybe half a year back, because then that's where it really started to grow, and now it comes down a little bit. But unfortunately, you know, we probably won't have 1.5% interest rate in a long time. But yeah, just to give you an example, on a single salary you might pay 20,000 Swedish krona or $1,900 for a 4-bedroom townhouse outside of Stockholm. That is without bills, which would be basically half if you work in IT in Stockholm. We had a net salary of 42,499 Swedish krona or $4,100. So that would be half of it, really, and that's just the housing. I feel that is a little bit much because you have bills on top, you obviously have groceries, maybe a little bit of kindergarten, maybe a car, you know. So especially if you live outside of a big city, you probably want to have a car. So yeah, these are all extra costs you have to consider when getting a job here in Sweden. I would love to hear your comments down below. I would say salaries are still quite good here in Sweden, depending on your occupation, of course, and then it really depends on where you live. I feel one salary is tougher to live on than 2 salaries, of course. I think you can have a very comfortable life if you are a couple or even in a family. If both of you are working, then I think, you can have a good life. You can pay for your housing quite easily, and you still have money for other things, not only the necessities, but also money for saving, investing, or going on holiday. Again, depending on your lifestyle. So that's still really good in Sweden, but at the same time, it is now tougher. Sweden is not that cheap anymore in terms of like housing compared to a few years back. So that has changed, and that is something you definitely have to consider when moving to Sweden. I hope you liked this video. Let me know by liking this video down there, and I hope I see you in my next video. Hej då!